Hello, I'm Stephan Schwartz, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Schwartz Report. This week, I want to talk about something that may make you feel a little better about what you can do. I hear so many people saying today that they just feel powerless, that there's nothing they can do. They just don't have any influence or can't make a difference. So I thought this week I'd talk about something that you can do. It's not political, it's not religious. What I'm going to talk about is objectively verifiable research. And that is the ability of you to hold an intention of healing for another and make a difference in an objectively verifiable way. Now, I know that a lot of people will say, well, that's just magical thinking. I mean, does this effect really exist? Is it possible in principle for individuals to influence at a distance the physiological function of another organism? I mean, is that just a religious belief? Or is it something you can objectively measure? So what I'm talking about is something you can objectively measure. This is a body of research that's been going on for about a little over 50 years. One of the first experiments was done by a French researcher named Jean-Marie back in 1968. And he wanted to know, is it possible for individuals to inhibit the growth of fungus by just focusing their intention on it? I mean, is that possible? Well, he grew a whole bunch of fungus in little glass dishes called Petri dishes, 194 dishes specifically. And he had 10 people come in, and he asked them to concentrate for 15 minutes on inhibiting the growth of those cultures in the dishes. Now, they weren't touching them. They were about 3 or 4 feet away, and they did what he asked. They concentrated for 15 minutes, and I think to everybody's surprise, 151 of the dishes showed retarded growth compared to the rest of the dishes. So 151 out of 194. And I start with this inhibition of growth to make the point that the intention that we hold, both positively and negatively, can have an effect. In 1973, a few years later, 2 researchers, Haraldson and Thorensen, who wanted to test this idea, but they wanted to look at it from the other way, they got 7 students of theirs, and they grew a bunch of yeast in test tubes, 240 test tubes, and they randomly split them into 2 groups, 120 to be the focus of intention and 120 to be controls. They just left them alone. And they asked 7 of their students to focus on producing increased growth in the 120 that they were focused on. And that's what happened. 2 other researchers a few years after that, Tedder and Monty, tried from a different direction, and that was inhibiting again, like Jean-Marie. What they wanted to look at was, does distance make a difference? So they got a group of people to do this, and they were 1 to 15 miles away from the fungal cultures. And they did 16 trials. That is, they tried it 16 times. And what they found was that the healers, the subjects, participants, could do both. They could impede the growth and they could stimulate the growth. And they could cause them to mutate in the directions that they wanted. Now, think about that. Fungus, small organisms. What about animals? Can you produce such an effect on an animal? Well, there have been over 20 experiments like that over several years. And one that I particularly liked was that the healers tried to awaken mice more quickly from anesthesia. So they would anesthetize the mice, and people would focus the intention that they should wake up. And what they found was highly significant, because in 19 of the 21 studies that they did, the mice that were the targets of intention to awaken them did awaken faster than the control mice. Then they asked another group of researchers, could you stop, for instance, a cancer tumor in a mouse? And they decided that they would try. Two researchers, Anito and Dwayne Elgin. And what they found was that the mice that were the target of healing intention had less tumor growth than the untreated mice who were the controls. Now, I have issues with that kind of animal experimentation, but nonetheless, the treated mice had a very different experience than the untreated mice. There were multiple replications of this experiment as well. 3 replications where they tried to cure them of a cancer that was transplanted into the mice. In 29 of the 33 experimental mice, 87.9%, were cured of cancer, versus 18 of the 26 control mice that were on site, and then none of the 8 controls who were off-site. But even more interesting, when they re-injected the tumor cells into the cured mice, it didn't work. They didn't get cancer again. So, little organisms, little animals. What about humans? Almost every religion has the idea of healing prayer, but is it religious, or is it that they have observed over the centuries, humans, that when people hold healing intention, that it makes a difference? So let me look at some of the healing experiments involving humans, because there have been quite a number of these. I have done several myself. And what you see is that people who are the focus of intentioned, therapeutic intention, we call it in science, have very different outcomes than people who are not the focus. And now what is that saying to you? You hear that a friend or a family member has contracted something. Well, could you make a difference? And the answer is, based on all of this research, and there are dozens and dozens of these studies now, is that yes, you can. If you hold healing intention for a few minutes for someone who has an illness, whatever it is, you can affect that person's course of illness. There have been so many of these studies, in fact, that a researcher named Bird looked at 333 patients admitted to a coronary care unit, and they split them into 2 groups, and they had healing for one group and nothing for another group. And what they found is that the subjects who were the focus of intention had significantly lower severity scores in their hospital course for their treatment of coronary disease. Dan Benor looked at a whole group of these studies, 131 of them, and what he found was that 77 of the 131 showed positive results. That is, people who were the focus of healing, and they used all kinds of different techniques, because what you see in this research is not that it's a particular religion or a particular religious technique. It has to do with holding therapeutic intention. And what it also shows is that people who can attain and sustain intentioned focus awareness, for instance, meditators, who in all of these kind of consciousness experiments, meditators always do better than non-meditators. What they found was that, as I said, of 131 controlled trials, 77 of them showed that the people got better than the control groups. A study was done about the success of in vitro fertilization. And what they discovered was those in vitro fertilizations that were the focus of therapeutic intention were more successful. So what I'm trying to get clear, I hope, with you, and you can go and see all of the references of all of these studies, because there's just too many for me to do them all. But you can go, as I do every week, I put up the references, and you can go to any of them and search out and read the research papers. You can get them off of the various databases. You can go to Google Scholar. You can go to PubMed. There are a number of places that you can go to do this. Wayne Jonas, a researcher in 2002, looked at 2,200 published reports, 122 laboratory studies, 80 randomized control trials, 128 summaries and reviews, 95 observational studies, 271 case reports. And what he discovered was, when you use standard medical evaluation, was that these mind-matter interactions, this therapeutic intention idea, that they rated quite well. In fact, the non-religious ones, where people just did a religious practice without any real focus of intention, it's the intention's the key. These just sort of casual religious, without really focusing intention, they didn't do as well. So it's not about religion. It's not about any particular practice. It's about the capacity to hold therapeutic intention, and you can do that by attaining and sustaining focused awareness. And meditation is the best way to do that. And I have talked about this in other podcasts, and you can go to my website, which is listed at the end of this, and you can download Meditation for Modern Minds, which is specifically developed to help people in modern day develop a successful meditation practice that's not religious. It's about being able to hold intention. So when you think about what's going on around you, and you see people who are struggling, for instance, or people who have an illness, people who are having problems, alcohol problems, drug problems, whatever. If you hold them in therapeutic intention, you can make a difference. You don't have to tell them. They don't have to know. You don't have to tell anybody. You just take a little time each day and hold these people in therapeutic intention. Now I'm going to tell you finally one of the most extraordinary things that I have discovered in this research. And that's research that was done by a man named Leonard Leibovici in Israel. And he asked the question, we know from all the research that distance doesn't matter. You can hold a person in healing intention who's across the world or next door and have the same effect. But he asked the question, could it make a difference if you prayed or held therapeutic intention for people in the past? Now, that's kind of hard to take aboard to think about, but he went to his computers at the hospital where he was working, and he got a population of people who had a very particular blood issue, over 3,000 of them, and he split them into two groups. He had the computer do that, so it's completely random. Now, these people had been in the hospital 4 to 10 years in the past, right? Think about this. 4 to 10 years in the future, he asked people to think about focus therapeutic intention on individuals in the past. Could that possibly work? Well, he did it, and it did. The people who had been the focus of therapeutic intention by individuals 4 to 10 years in the future of when they were in the hospital had a different course of illness, a much better course of illness than the people who were the controls. So what this is telling us is not only does distance not matter, time doesn't matter. You can go back and hold therapeutic intention for people in the past. They won't know it. None of the people who were the focus of Leibovici's study had any idea that this was happening, but they had a very different course. So if you hear about someone in the past who was having a problem, you can influence how that went down, how that, whatever, the course it took, by holding them in therapeutic intention. We, as human beings, by holding therapeutic intention for individuals, can make a difference. We are not powerless. We are not unable to influence for well-being. So as you think about it, as you read the news, as you talk to your neighbors, your friends, as you hear about things, take a few moments. Develop the daily practice of meditation. And when you end your meditation, hold that person or group who are having a problem of some kind in well-being. You don't have to visualize a particular kind of well-being. It's not that you hold a specific outcome. It's that you hold them in well-being. And if you do that, you can make a difference. You are not powerless. If all of us would spend a little time doing that, we could change the course of the world. Thank you.